Hi, it's David from Revolution Learning. Over this past few days, I've been running a number of workshops in the subject of health and well-being. And one of the subjects that is included in those workshops is resilience. How resilient are we? And it's been really interesting because a number of conversations have cropped up in those courses. And we've talked through a number of different examples about how things have impacted on our own lives. Lots of examples from the delegates and one from me too. And this kind of really prompted me to think about one very recent situation that happened to me, which I'm going to share with you in just a few moments. But these conversations were mainly based around our responses to feedback. So when somebody provides us with a piece of feedback, how does it make us feel? What do we do with it? And how do we move on from it, which is the most important thing? When we receive feedback, particularly negative feedback, it's really interesting how it impacts on us and how it makes us feel, not just at that time, but for the long term afterwards. Now, quite recently, I've sat a number of courses with Tony Robbins. And in each of those courses, Tony Robbins has this particular quote that always resonates with me. And it kind of sits around this area. And that quote is, "Where focus goes, energy flows." Now, what he means by this is, if we become so hyper-focused on one particular thing, and especially if that thing is negative, then all of our energy then becomes negative. How many times do you think you've received a piece of feedback or something has happened around you? Like, for example, you didn't win that piece of work or a decision didn't go your way. How much time did you spend focusing on the fact that it didn't happen or it didn't work? And this is quite interesting. This is what those conversations we had in those courses were about. And this is what I wanted to share with you today, is to really begin to think about how do you respond to negative feedback or when decisions don't go your way or you don't get the things that you want. Now here's an example for you, and this is a real story. So mid-2019, well before COVID-19 hit, my team and I began to dabble in some online learning. So we wanted to produce some really simple e-learning modules that we could give away for free as a support element to our paid programs. They were never intended to be offered for sale. Now, I got invited round about that time to go and pitch for a piece of work with a client. We had lots of conversations on the telephone prior to this happening, and they said they would let me know the date of when they wanted me to go and pitch for this piece of work. They called me and asked if I could go the next day. This was after almost a week of hearing nothing from them. And they couldn't fit me in any other time. So if I didn't go, I had no choice, or no opportunity, to pitch for that work. So I agreed. And I felt that I had enough information from the previous conversations to be able to put this pitch together. And my journey to the location was going to be 3 or 4 hours by train, so I also had that time to be able to pull all of this together. And I checked before we ended the conversation what else they wanted me to bring, and their answer was very simply, just prepare a pitch around the stuff that we have spoken about. So I arrived at this location with my presentation and all ready to go. And they apologized about the short notice, and I made a comment like, it's okay, it's a very short amount of time to prepare for it, but I feel as though I've got everything together. Then they told me that the brief had changed. Originally, all of this work was going to be face-to-face sessions. They now wanted almost 50% of this to be e-learning. And I was honest at that point and said, we don't do e-learning, but I can subcontract it out to somebody. So, there's always an option or an opportunity of how we can do this, but it's not something that we have the expertise in right now. And I felt that the meeting went pretty well. I presented the pitch and I talked about where we could bring the e-learning in. And 4 days later, I got an email from them with the most unconstructive piece of feedback that I had ever received. 3 or 4 paragraphs on the whole saying, I didn't prepare, therefore I was unprofessional, and I didn't have a positive enough response to the changes in their plans. And I quickly looked back at my performance in that meeting, and I couldn't quite understand where the feedback came from. So it must have been the way that I delivered one of those comments about the short amount of time and my response to not being able to deliver e-learning. I was quite shocked by the feedback. It was really, really unconstructive. And it's at that point where my mechanism, if you want to call it that, kicked in about how I respond to these things. Years ago, I would have been so hyper-focused on the fact that I didn't win the work and the feedback that was delivered. This time around, I replied back with, thank you for the feedback. It was great to meet you. And it's this mechanism that I've developed over the years that I think has become such an important part in how successful our business has become and how efficient and effective I think that I am and my team is in the work that we do. And I almost have 2 responses to these things when we don't win work or when the rare occasions when we get this negative feedback. And that is response 1, what my team now call my it is what it is response. And it's almost I do this, I just go, well, it is what it is. We didn't win it, we need to move on. And I'm all about forward momentum. I'm all about kind of moving on to the next thing. If we dwell too much on the fact that we didn't win it, that's really going to impact on our ability to be able to get the next thing done. My response in this scenario was another response that I tend to do in private. And it's a response, I guess you can call it my I'll show you response or I'll prove you wrong response. And immediately after I sent that email back to say thank you for the feedback, I got my team together and said we need to relook at this e-learning stuff and we need to get it out there and we need to do a really good job. And after that, we developed e-learning modules, we brought in online virtual learning, we put this entire package together really quickly after that, and we pushed it out as a payable product. And the feedback that we got was exceptional. It's almost like I wanted to say, look at what we're doing. We could have done this if you had given us the chance to work with you through subcontracting it. But no, I wanted to prove that actually we could do e-learning. And that stood us in really good stead because we had all of that in place in round about September, October 2019. January, COVID-19 happened. And we were all ready to go with online learning. And it's that response, if you like, that when somebody gives you negative feedback or things don't go your way, if you choose to spend the time looking back at the fact that it didn't happen, it is much more likely that you begin to generate negative energy. You need to find a way, if you like, to accept that it's happened and then move on. That doesn't mean to say you have to agree with it, but pick a decision, pick an outcome, pick a way to move forward. Just don't dwell on the fact that it happened. Question it, if the feedback wasn't clear, but don't get into an argument. Don't defend your position. Just say thanks and just move on. You might even choose to roll your eyes and say, yeah, whatever. Now, it's not the most positive response, but at least it's a decision that you've taken to move on. Think forward momentum, and remember that term by Tony Robbins, where focus goes, energy flows. If you focus on the negative, then you are going to feel negative and generate negative energy, which is what you don't want. Find ways to find forward momentum and move on positively. I hope you found that useful, and I look forward to seeing you next time.